Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman. Welcome to our tribe. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Tory and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. My name is Gertrude Mache, and I have yet another fascinating guest. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Hi, my name is Shenea Booth. I also go by Shenea Stiletto as a stage name and as a part of my brand. I am based in Los Angeles, California, the United States, and I am 35 years of age. I am a professional circus artist. I am also a former two-time world champion in acrobatic gymnastics. I was the first ever American acrobatic gymnast to win a world championships. And then I was also the first ever American acrobatic gymnast to win a second title. And I also became a USA Gymnastics Hall of Fame member. I was the first acrobat in American history to ever get that honor. And I am also an honorary Olympian from the 2004 Olympics as well. I then transitioned into the world of circus. I was the first African-American woman to star in a leading character and acrobatic role in a Cirque Du Soleil production. And that was just about 5 years ago. So it was incredibly recent. So I have been at the forefront of two very niche environments since I was a very little girl. And so this world of competitive sport, transitioning into high performance artistic work has been all that I've ever known. I host a podcast all about circus and acrobatics and gymnastics and advocacy. In and around the sexual abuse and sexual harassment issues, as I am also a survivor of USA Gymnastics. I am most recently a recipient of one of the biggest settlements ever awarded in American history to victims of sexual violence. I, along with the many survivors of Larry Nassar, finally won our civil case against USA Gymnastics and also against the Olympic movement, and we're able to hold them responsible for the rapes and molestations that we all experienced as little gymnasts on our way to either Olympic gold or to world gold. On my podcast, Live Like an Acrobat, I go through every single facet of my journey, and I really try to break it down for those within the general public that are not as in tune, I would say, with the elements of what it's like to grow up and exist in the highly competitive gymnastics world and also to the circus world. I try and represent the humanity of circus artists and humanity of the gymnastics world, because we're usually not really heard from. You don't usually hear us speak. We don't usually exist, at least before, most recently, with so much independent agency. And I've always thought that that was something very important that was lacking from both the gymnastics world and from the circus world. And these are very interesting kind of uncharted paths. They still continue to this day exist in some of a mystery for the general public. And so I wanted to kind of go behind the veil for my podcast and give voice to gymnasts, give voice to circus performers of all kinds all over the world, and also too for performers and gymnasts of color. As I am African American, I'm also biracial American, and so I've existed within two worlds my entire life, and how those are brought together as I continue to be a very specific type of performer in the circus world, as there are so few Black circus performers in the world. I'm in a lot of spaces by myself at this high level and this high caliber, which I also wanted to bring much more focus on. These were not issues that we were able to speak about up until very recently, obviously, with the effects of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the entire movement that surged through America and then extended all around the globe. And so these are conversations that I was having in the background, but through my podcast, Live Like an Acrobat, I have really become very outspoken in my circus environment, in the circus industry, and speaking about what it's like growing up in a system, what it's like growing up as the only Black acrobat at all, where you are constantly in spaces that were not made for you, and that people don't often understand where you came from and how you got there, and that being such an anomaly. And you know, let alone going into the circus world, where again, I'm usually the only performer of color in any production, which still kind of shocks and surprises people to this day. I mean, we are in 2022, and the public thinks that circus is much more integrated and diverse than it actually is. And so I have felt strongly that these stories and the elements to my stories and to those within the community should have voice, and that we should be able to speak on these issues without fear of retribution or retaliation within our careers, which previously we felt that we would suffer. And I've still gone out on a limb because I'm not, I would say, fully safe within speaking on these topics, from having my career, you know, have kind of be knocked against in some way, because it's still, people are still afraid to speak out. They're still afraid to ask for what they need. I also, within the influence of my podcast and my advocacy within speaking, I'm an advocate for RAIN. That's the rape and incest molestation for survivors. It's a nationwide network in America, and I do advocacy on behalf of them as well. And I do as much as I possibly can to normalize the conversations in and around abuse, and especially with respect to youth sports. I have advocated strongly for different statutes within American law, and I've been a part of some historic laws actually being passed, which have opened up statutes, and also and statutes means that you have a longer time to report a crime, basically. We've also passed through legislation which has created more policing for youth sports and for the Olympic movement, so that if you are being molested or raped or abused in any way, actually, by someone in a position of power, as a competitive athlete or as a competitive gymnast, you have somewhere to report, so that the national governing bodies, which is USA Gymnastics, for example, can't just sweep it under the rug or take care of it in-house like they used to do when I was a little girl, meaning that they did not have to report your abuse to the police, meaning that they didn't have to alert the broader gymnastics community about your abuse, meaning that they didn't have to even tell anyone within the broader community that their coach might be a suspected pedophile. So these last 10 years that I have been an advocate and gone through my own criminal cases against my own USA Gymnastics World Class coach, who I was able to get put in prison by going undercover with the police. As an adult, obviously, it took me years to get to that point, and now it's taken me 10 years plus to be able to get this settlement against USA Gymnastics. And what was also so important about the historic settlement that we got was not just about the money, but we negotiated several new terms that USA Gymnastics and the Olympic movement would have to agree to and have to adhere to moving forward for decades. They would also have to include our voices as survivors on their boards and within their processes, in how they regulate their system and how much influence of power those that are already in positions of power have. So they have to invite us into the conversation, and they have to listen to our ideas with how we feel like the national governing bodies such as USA Gymnastics or the Olympic movement is supposed to move forward. Now, it's very imperfect, and the struggle will continue. I also too recently participated in a very big investigation into the new network that was created to police these environments, because they found out that they are also not doing their job adequately, and that they have not been given enough power by our governments to actually keep our children safe while they practice gymnastics, or while they practice swimming, or while they practice tennis, or while they practice taekwondo. All of the sports fall under this category, under the policing of safe sport. So I just finished participating in a very big investigation into safe sport, and this just shows how much more needs to be done. The job is never done when you're advocating and trying to get these environments changed, and it's not overnight. And so I've also now tried to bring the advocacy that I was doing within the gymnastics environments into the circus environment, because during the pandemic, our sector as circus artists and circus workers was so adversely impacted and affected, because we live for live entertainment. Without live entertainment, without being able to leave your house, without people being able to gather, we have no careers. And so it was, within an instant, millions of circus workers all over America, the ones that you see performing for Cirque Du Soleil in Las Vegas, the ones that you see on all of the Got Talent shows, the ones that you see in the big circuses traveling all over the world, we all lost our careers in literally a day, with no access to be able to continue to work virtually and make the same amount of income. And so for us, there's literally been no safety net. We have no legislative power that includes circus performers actually inside of that. There's no policies to give us benefits without having access to our job. And there are no protections that we have either within regulations, within safety policies for circus performers and circus workers within America. And so we saw, a big group of us, we saw that this was our opportunity to fight for more rights, and to fight for rights that even if we don't benefit from those, because we're kind of in the latter parts of our career, that we will be building a network for circus performers that are coming behind us to be able to benefit from that. We are at this time trying to unionize circus within America, which before the pandemic seemed inconceivable, but has been a conversation in the circus world for decades and decades. And so I am now a part of a network that meets with sitting lawmakers, that sits with senators, congressmen, and we advocate and we lobby to Washington, D.C. now, trying to get different acts and different bills passed, and trying to get the language written that would give us those powers, that would give us those benefits, and give us those rights to be recognized. Because right now, circus is much more of a multidisciplinary artistic form in America. And so it keeps us away from a lot of funding. So we're not allowed to get certain grants, and we're not allowed to get access to certain funding that would help us to stay afloat throughout a pandemic time, or a financial crisis, or effects of a war like we're seeing right now in Eastern Europe. And so what we're trying to do is create a safety net that's never really been there for circus. So a lot of my life kind of has intertwined with itself and it's very interesting the way that it's happened over this time, where I've learned through a lot of pain and through a lot of struggle, obviously, and within a lot of taboo topics. And so I really, in many ways, am grateful for that, because when you are spending a lot of your time speaking about things that nobody wants to speak about, like the rape and molestation of young children, it really kind of opens you and makes you very unafraid to speak about all sorts of other topics.
Wow, I don't even know where to start with this interview. It's not every day that I am left with no words. You have had an incredible life. Okay, so let me take you all the way back to the beginning. Tell me a little bit how you started in your career. What was the motivation and the drive?
Thank you, Gertrude, and thank you so much for saying that, and thank you for this question. I came to acrobatics in a very unique way. I am originally from the northern part of California, so a small town called San Jose, which is not so small now. It's actually a very big tech town now, where Facebook was, and Google, and places of that nature. When I was little, it was a very suburban town. It was a very diverse, actually, part of California, which I was very grateful for. And I just started doing dance, ballet, and tap and jazz as a little girl. My grandmother actually saw that I was very quiet, and I was the youngest child of 5, so I had a very big family. And they really wanted to open me up and bring me out of my shell. And so my grandmother had this idea, we should put her in some kind of activities. And I was very, very tiny. I am still very, very small woman, but I was very small for my age as well. And so when I was walking through the dance center one day, my first coach, who had immigrated from Bulgaria to San Jose, California, which again was incredibly rare. 20 years ago, it was more rare than words can express. And so he saw me walking through a dance studio one day, and he asked my grandmother if I would be able to participate in an acrobatics or gymnastics class, because he thought that I would be perfect. He said, she's a little bit old because she's 8 years old, almost 9. He said, but I think that she would be wonderful and I would still love to have her, even though she's a bit old, because you usually start in gymnastics or acrobatics around the age of about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And anything post that, it's just a little bit more difficult. But like I said, I was small for an 8-year-old.
That's just incredible. So just by chance, you meet this coach who sees your physique, knows you have probably the ability to do it. So you've been defying the odds every single step of your career by the sound of it.
Yes.
So that's how you got started. Now, I am a diversity inclusion consultant, and I'm always curious to know and understand what the experience must have been like for you as a minority in that environment. And I'm pretty sure there wouldn't have been many Black kids in that kind of a space. How many were you? How have you found that part of your life throughout your career?
Well, it was really interesting, Gertrude. I mean, what I did have at that point is that my sister eventually got involved in acrobatics as well. So I started competing with my sister, but it was very strange. We were the only Black acrobats, like, in America for the most of our competitive career. Just to give folks an example, I mean, that's thousands and thousands of competitive acrobats, and there were about a few Black acrobats when we were competing that you can count on your 10 fingers. So growing up in that environment, I was actually very, very fortunate and lucky, because even though my sister and I actually experienced a lot of bias and a lot of racism, we had coaches that were incredibly protective. And the thing about European coaches, which isn't spoken about a lot, is that their concept of racism in that way does not exist. So for them, my first coach, he was really confused. He was like, it's all about ability, because he was like, they're so incredibly gifted. And me and my sister would win very quickly. We moved up, into higher categories quicker than anybody had ever seen. We started doing tricks that no one had ever done before in America. And so we received a lot of bias with scoring, with being kept out of big competitions. I experienced, things being said about me that my coaches were absolutely perplexed by, my European coaches, because they really did not understand. So they spent a lot of time fighting on our behalf, which was amazing. I didn't have coaches that subjected me to actually that type of bias. It actually existed outside of my acrobatics gym. And I think maybe it would have been a little bit different had I been not with my sister. So the fact that we were together was fascinating. And then also too, just to give you an example, we were traveling all over the world at that time too. So I spent most of my time traveling to Russia, traveling to Ukraine, traveling to Poland, traveling to Belgium, traveling to, all of those areas of Europe. And again, we were going into villages for training camps where they had never, ever seen a Black person in person. And so we were in a bubble because we were protected, but it was really surreal. And I understand it more the older I get, just how surreal it was.
That's incredible. I lived in Norway when I was 19, going on 20. And I remember living in a small village in the middle of Norway where they had never seen a person of color. I had people stopping me in the street to touch my skin to see if the color comes off. They would want to touch my hair, and it was very intrusive and very irritating. But I can relate to that. And now I'm married to a man from Poland. So I've been to Poland a couple of times. I can relate to that as well. Oh my gosh, that is just absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So you went through all of these challenges, but you defied all odds and you succeeded. You kept winning competition after competition. Where did the abuse start, and what was that like?
The abuse started actually when I was 14 years old. What happened was that I lost my first coach to two bouts of cancer, or to leukemia actually, and it was devastating. And so I didn't know if I would continue to compete. So I lost my career for a little while. I actually had a revival of my career through some other gyms. They really pulled me and my sister back in and said, it's much too early for you both to quit. We know that you're devastated at the loss of your coach, because my coach was everything to me. Just to describe for audiences, it really is your second parent. You're with them all day, all night. They're going with you on trips that your parents can't afford to send themselves on. So they are your liaison to everything that you do, and your protector. And so I came from really beautiful coaches. And so I ended up being offered a mission to go to a very high level gym that was very popular, whom I had known since I was 8 years old. So it was going into a space of elders that I had been comfortable with for many years, from when I was little. And so because they did not have their gym in the same city as mine, my parents had to make a very difficult decision, because they couldn't afford to move with me to a city that was about 5 or 6 hours away by car. So what used to happen in the gymnastics world is that you would go and live with your coach and make visits home to your parents, so that you could have high level elite coaching and have a chance to go to world championships, to have a shot to, play in the big leagues. And so my parents took me out of a very high level private school, which was very difficult for them. They had visions that were, they had different visions for me. But I had begged them because I was so passionate about it. And so I moved in with my coaches. It was a husband and wife couple and their little child. And they had a lot of little girls staying with them for many years. And so I would live with them during the week and do high level training. So I was training about 8 hours a day. I was doing school by home in between that. And then I would fly home to my parents on the weekends. And my parents would fly back and forth as much as they could as well, within their working schedules, making sure they were making enough money to send me all over Europe and all over the world so that I could train and compete. So at this point, I was no longer training with my sister. And it took about a year before the grooming started by my former USA Gymnastics coach, David Rickbaum. And it started, with him grooming me, which is getting you comfortable with things that are inappropriate over a period of time. And again, we were very sheltered little kids. For people that think that 14 is maybe a little bit, mature, we're very sheltered. We didn't do very much outside of go to the gym, compete, and then be around our own little circle. We didn't know very much, we didn't have concepts of sex. We weren't taught about things like that. We were closer to around maybe 10 years old, if you would think about our emotional capacity if that makes sense. And so it quickly progressed into molestation, and then it quickly progressed into daily rapes every single morning, with him barricading my bedroom door just while his wife slept down the hallway, and with him many times starting to molest me and rape me before I even woke up. And so it also progressed to turning into molestation and rape in various environments where he could take advantage of me in that way too.
You have managed to harness this story and claim it back. I really commend you and admire you for what you've done, because a lot of young women end up with guilt, with shame that doesn't belong to them. So first of all, I want to say thank you for sharing your story. It's really important for these conversations to be had, because a lot of young girls will not talk about it. A lot of women don't talk about it, and that's why it keeps perpetuating and it keeps happening. So thank you for your work on that front. Now, if you were to go back to your younger self and have a conversation with that young girl who was going through this and give her 3 nuggets of wisdom, what would you say to her?
That is such a beautiful question, Rude. I would tell her that she is not at fault for anything that will ever happen to her, that she is truly the victim in this situation and completely innocent, and that she did nothing to provoke what has happened to her. I would tell her as well that she has the power to speak for herself, and that the power that is perceivably stronger than her actually isn't. And then I would also tell her that she is a beautiful little girl that has qualities that make her special, and that they are innately within her and naturally within her, and that they don't need to come from anywhere outside of her.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful and very, very empowering and powerful. So, how can people find you? What support do you need at this moment in time? What are you working on?
Thank you so much, Gertrude. I am working continuously on my podcast and to build the audience for my Live Like an Acrobat podcast. I also have a separate podcast on Circus Talk, which is a great organization and one of the biggest circus networks in the world. It's called Think Like an Acrobat, where I teach acrobats and circus individuals how to work and create in this business. So I teach them practical tools about how to be an entrepreneur, how to be a negotiator, and how to protect themselves in all ways business. I call them Circuspreneurs. That's my network. And what would help immensely is to draw attention to all of the causes that I'm a part of, for people to get interested in the cause in and around survivors of sexual violence and abuse, in and around the Olympic movement with respect to youth sports, and also to within circus advocacy and in vouching for us, and also to listening to the podcast and listening to my guests and following my guest stories, because I interview a very broad range of individuals from every single background that you can imagine: BIPOC, the LGBTQI plus, IA plus community, the community of the disabled. I am incredibly diverse and inclusive and representative, because to me, that is the world that I've grown up in ever since I was little. And those are the individuals from every single background you can imagine, from every part of the world, that I would like to give voice to and help to assist on every single front that I can, including the competitive movements and the professional artistic movements.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a very, very, very inspiring interview. Please don't go away. Hold on 5 minutes while I just wind down the show. Thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story movement is attracting some phenomenal women from all over the world. Today is an example that crosses so many issues, from being a minority, diversity and inclusion, sexual molestation and rape. And you have told your story from a position of such strength I hope there's somebody out there who's listening who will find some strength as well to get out of a dark tunnel that they are in. So I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody. Thank you again for this interview. Have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And bye for now. Thank you again, Shenea.
Thank you so much, Gertrude.